Okay. Guys, can you hear me? If you can hear me, please indicate so that we can start. Okay, thank you for confirming that. We are starting immediately. Like you know, today is the 20th of April 2023, and we are live on our free COSHH assessment workshop. Okay, so today we'll be treating COSHH assessment. We are going to learn first the rudiments of COSHH assessment. Then we'll wrap it up with a practical COSHH assessment. All right. So let us start immediately. First, you might know me or you don't know me. So my name is Johnson Wala, and I'm a chartered member of IOSH. I'm also a member of IRSM. I've been in health and safety field for over 14 years now. So today I'll be taking you on the rudiments of COSHH assessments, and we'll wrap it up with a practical COSHH assessment. Okay, so let us start immediately. So during today's presentation, we'll be learning first, what's COSHH assessment? Why do we conduct COSHH assessment? Why is it so important to do COSHH assessment? Thirdly, we'll be talking about the steps that you need to follow to do a sufficient COSHH assessment. The fourth one, we'll be talking about contents of SDS, safety data sheet. Then we'll be wrapping it up with practical COSHH assessment. Are you with me? I hope my screen, you can see my screen. If you can see my screen, just confirm so that I'll be sure that you are seeing my screen. Just confirm with the chat. Okay, thanks for confirming. All right, on the screen we have what is COSHH assessment. And the next session will be talking about why is it important. COSHH simply means control of substances hazardous to health. Okay, so it's just an acronym. The full meaning is control of substances hazardous to health. Why is this? Why do we do COSHH assessment? The major reason is for us to identify hazards and risks associated with the use of hazardous substances. Okay, it's a specific risk assessment. Last week we talked about risk assessment. So this risk assessment is concentrated on use of hazardous substances. Okay, so it's like a specific risk assessment on use of hazardous substances. So if you are using any chemical, paint, all sorts of hazardous substances, you need to conduct a COSHH assessment. It's very, very important, and it's a legal requirement. Okay. Now, COSHH assessment need to be conducted in every workplace where there is presence of hazardous materials. Okay. Now, you need to know that this COSHH assessment doesn't cover the use of lead and asbestos or radioactive substances. So those are covered in another regulation. Okay, why do we do this COSHH assessment? First, it's a legal requirement. The Control of Substances Hazardous to Health Regulation 2002, Regulation 6, makes it mandatory that every employer that has more than 5 employees must conduct a COSHH assessment. As far as you have you are using hazardous substances. Okay. Another reason why it's very important is that it helps us to minimize the risk to health to all the employees. It also reduces the exposure to harmful substances, protects your employees, and helps to reduce cost. Okay, if there is any incident or e-health related to use of hazardous substances, then you will be having costs, insured and uninsured costs. But if you conduct a proper COSHH assessment and you implement it, then you will be reducing costs associated with incident and accident. All right, these are the 5 basic steps that you need to take when you are conducting a COSHH assessment. The first one is to collect information on the hazardous substances you have in your workplace. Okay. The second one is to evaluate the health risk associated with these substances you have collected their information. Then the third one is to select appropriate control measures. The control measures starting from elimination to reduction, you know the hierarchy of risk. Okay, then the hierarchy of control, I mean. Number 4 is to record your findings. It's required that whatever you have found, the control measures you have put in place, you need to record them. The 5th one is to measure performance and review your assessment. So it's important after a long time, after a particular time, you have to review your performance and you review the risk assessment. All right, this is the first step. The first step of conducting COSHH assessment is to identify the hazardous substances in your workplace. First, you have to go around inside the stores at the workplace and identify those hazardous substances you are using in your workplace. The second place where you can identify them is your MSDS. Now it's called the Safety Data Sheet, SDS. Okay, you look at the SDS and know the hierarchy of risk involved in that substances. Through the SDS, you will be able to identify if this substance is hazardous, if it has a lot of impact. So you have to check your SDS. Okay, then you check the work processes. If the work processes are going to be emitting hazardous substances, then it's part of your hazardous. For example, if you are grinding floors, let's say concrete floors, and the concrete floors, they were made with cement or maybe silica dust. So in that process, you know that the work process is going to generate hazardous substance. So a COSHH assessment is required. Okay. The other place you can identify your hazardous substance is through your accident book. You go through the project accident book from month to month. What are the incident or e-health that have been recorded, and you tally it with the workplace, the type of materials that are being used. Then from there you can identify the hazardous substances. The second step is to evaluate your risk. In evaluating your risk, these steps or these points must be taken into consideration. The first one is the potential of the substance to cause harm. So if the hazardous substance has the potential to cause harm, then you must evaluate the risk. Okay. You also evaluate the risk by checking the likelihood of this substance to cause harm, the likelihood that the people will be exposed to this hazardous substance. Also, another point you have to consider is how often that people will be exposed to this hazardous substance. How often? Is it once a week? Is it a daily occurrence? Is it every hour? Or is it once in a month? So you have to consider this while evaluating the risk. So the next thing you have to consider is the level, the duration of this exposure. How many minutes, how many hours, how many seconds are the workers going to be exposed to this hazardous substance? So in evaluating the health risk associated with any hazardous substance, you must consider this point. You must consider the potential for the substance to cause harm, the likelihood of exposure. Because if people are not exposed, then you might be having a minimal risk. But if there is likelihood of exposure, then you have a high risk at hand. Okay, then you'll be talking about the duration, you'll be talking about the length, how many hours they are going to stay there. Then these all have to be put into consideration during evaluation of health risk. Okay, then the third step in COSHH assessment is to select appropriate control measures to reduce or eliminate the risk. You know the hierarchy of risk control. The first in the list of hierarchy of risk control is elimination. Okay, so you either eliminate the process that is generating the hazardous substance, or you eliminate the hazardous substance itself, or the next in the hierarchy of the risk control is substitution. Maybe you can find another substance that is less hazardous to the one you are using. Okay, you can substitute it with another substance that is less hazardous. The next in the line is isolation. Okay, isolation simply means you can isolate the people from the hazardous substance. For example, you can use walls to demarcate the worker from where the hazardous substance is being used. Okay, then engineering control. You can make some physical changes in the process. For example, you can add adequate ventilation. You can add ventilation fans. You can add forced ventilation. Try to add some engineering mechanisms that will help to reduce the amount of exposure, or reduce the type of exposure that the people face. Okay, then the next control measure that you can talk of is administrative control. In administrative control, you can install signages, you can conduct trainings, you can maybe you can implement a job rotation, you can implement frequent rests and breaks. Okay, so these are some administrative controls that you can put in place to reduce the risk level. Or personal protective equipment like mask, goggles, hand gloves. So these are personal protective equipment that can also be helpful in controlling the risk. All right, then the next step in the COSHH assessment is to record your findings. You record your findings, make sure you write them down, use your COSHH assessment forms, fill all the columns and all the rows to ensure that all precautions are properly documented. Okay, then the fifth step in the COSHH assessment is to monitor your performance. You monitor your performance regularly. You review when it's required. When do you review? If there is a need for the review, if there is an accident, if an accident that has occurred and there is a possibility that the COSHH assessment, the control measures stipulated in COSHH assessment is not adequate or was not sufficient to control the risk, then you have to review it. Okay, then if there are changes in the work process and the equipment and the substances in use, then there is need to review your COSHH assessment. Okay, so there's other substance, if there is a new substance introduced, then you have to also conduct risk assessment. Okay, so these are the 5 steps that needs to be followed to conduct a proper risk COSHH assessment. All right, now let's talk about a safety data sheet. Why do we need to talk about safety data sheet? Because you cannot conduct a proper COSHH assessment without consulting your safety data sheet. Safety data sheet is provided by the manufacturer. the hazardous substance manufacturer provides the safety data sheet where they stipulate the contents of the materials, they stipulate the instructions, they stipulate the control measures that you can use to mitigate the risk. Okay, so the safety data sheet is very, very important. It's an important component of COSHH assessment. You cannot conduct a proper COSHH assessment without looking at the safety data sheet. So that is why we are going to look at the contents of safety data sheets and when and where you need them to conduct a proper COSHH assessment. Okay. Safety data sheet has 16 sessions. Okay. It has basically 16 sessions. And in these 16 sessions, they talk about different aspects of this hazardous substance. So you need to look at them each session by session for every hazardous substance. You don't combine COSHH assessment of two substances at the same time, except if they are used interchangeably. If they are used together, then you must consult the two safety data sheets to make proper COSHH assessment. Okay, now let's talk about the sessions in safety data sheet. The first session is the identification session. This session is where you have the names, the acronyms of the substance, the manufacturer's name, the address, the contact number of the manufacturer, the emergency questions that you can ask, or emergency number of the manufacturer. Okay, in the identification session, you know, immediately you start your COSHH assessment, you need to write the name of the substance, their acronym or the name it used to be known before. So this can be found in the identification session. And that is the first session you will see in your safety data sheet. Okay. After this theoretical aspect, we are going to open up a safety data sheet and we look at them step by step and we'll conduct a proper COSHH assessment in this session. Just stay tuned. Okay, then the second session of the safety data sheet is called the hazard session. So this is where it identifies the hazards, okay, associated with this substance that you are using or you are evaluating. Okay, the risk associated with them, it has the intensity of scale of 0 to 4. Where 0 means the least and 4 means the intense, the most intense. Okay, then the third session of the safety data sheet is composition and ingredients. So this session tells you about the makeup of this hazardous substance, the reagents, all the substances that are put together to produce the hazardous substance. For example, a paint. In the composition section, you will see all the ingredients, what makes up the color, what makes up the odor, why it's like this. It will list all the components of that hazardous substance in the composition section of the safety data sheet. Okay, now the fourth session is the first aid measures. So this session tells you about the first aid measures that you can implement if there is an accident or an incident occurs. For example, if somebody swallows the substance, at this session, session number 4 will tell you what you can do to help the person as a first aider or as the first respondent. Okay? Or if the substance enters somebody's eyes, okay, what are you going to do? So the session number 4 of the SDS will tell you exactly what to do when the substance enters the eye. So you don't assume. You need to take the instruction or take the information from the safety data sheet and transfer it to your COSHH assessment. The COSHH assessment, remember, is going to be specific to your workplace. Okay, the SDS safety data sheet is generic, is for every workplace. But when you are conducting COSHH assessment, you are putting into consideration your workplace specifically, the type of activity you are doing, the number of people are exposed, the duration they are exposed, and other substances that are mixed together with the particular substance. So that is why it's called COSHH assessment. It's specific to your workplace. That is why you cannot use only the SDS and say you are prepared. You cannot be prepared when you have only the safety data sheet without conducting a COSHH assessment. COSHH assessment brings the generic information you have there in the SDS into your specific perspective of your workplace. Okay. Now, the fifth session of the SDS, talked about the firefighting measures. For example, not every type of hazardous substance should be fought with water if there is fire outbreak. Some require you to use CO2, some requires you to use foam, some requires you to use water, some requires you to use inject. Okay, so this session 5 is where you will get the detailed information, the appropriate type of a fire extinguisher to use if there is any fire outbreak while using that substance. So you don't assume or don't say that you have already a fire extinguisher at the workplace, but you need to consider what your safety data sheet says. You need to consider the type of recommended fire extinguisher. Okay, the session 6 of the safety data sheet talks about accidental release. If there is an accidental release or spillage of this hazardous substance to the environment, what are you going to do? What are the measures of the cleanup? What are the actions you are supposed to take if there is an accidental release? So the session 6 tells you exactly what to do. Okay, session 7 talks about the handling and the storage. So if you need to move your hazardous substance from one place to the other, from the storage area to the workplace, how do you handle it? That information is specifically at session 7 of your safety data sheet. Session 8 talks about the exposure controls and personal protection. So the PPE required for the hazardous substance, the specific PPE that you need to use is recommended in session 8 of our safety data sheet. Session 9 talks about the physical and chemical properties of the hazardous substance. It tells you the physical properties, talks about the weight, talks about the color, talks about the physical changes, the temperatures, the flash points, all the informations, physically and chemical properties of that substance are all listed in session 9 of our safety data sheet. Session 10 talks about the reactivity or stability of the substance. Okay, at what state or at what condition is this substance going to react? So you need that information in session 9, session 10 of the safety data sheet. Session 11 talks about toxicology. Okay, the toxic, how toxic the substance is. If the toxic is carcinogenic, that means if it causes cancer. If the substance is mutagenic, that means if it can change the DNA of the person and that is exposed. Okay, this session also can tell you about the lethal dose. Lethal dose simply means the amount of the chemical that is required to kill 50% of the animal, of the person that is exposed. Okay, so this is what you see in session 11. Now, session 12 talks about the ecological information. Ecological information simply means how this substance reacts to the environment. Okay, the reagent, how it can cause harm to the environment, how it can cause harm. For example, if the substance goes into the streams or lake, how it will affect the animals in the water. Okay, so that will be seen in session 12 of the safety data sheet. Session 13 talks about the disposal, how you are going to dispose the hazardous substance, either the packagings or the containers, or the after there is a spillage, the collected waste, how you are going to dispose it. Okay, section 14 talks about the transportation. It lists the shipping requirement. Okay, then section 15 is talking about the regulatory requirements. Regulatory requirements simply means the laws, the regulations that are guiding the use of this substance. Then in section 16, that is where you see other information. Any information that is not listed in all other sections will be available in section 16. They will give you additional information about the substance and that was not listed in other sections. Okay, these are all, this is the 16 sessions in the SDS. And you can't conduct proper COSHH assessment without consulting your safety data sheet. That is where you have most of the information. All right, now let's look at the hazard signs and their meanings. These hazard signs, you are going to be seeing them in the SDS. So it has different meanings and different symbols. Different symbols means different things. Okay, so you need to understand them. In some safety data sheet, they will only draw the symbol. There will be no explanation. So you need to get conversant with what this GHS hazard signs, what they mean. Okay, now this sign, this health hazard, just like a human being with some splash on the chest. So what does it mean? It means aspiration toxicity. It means also carcinogen. Carcinogen means it can cause cancer. It also means mutagenic, means the genes, the DNA can be mutated, trying to disorder the genes of the offspring. Okay, it can cause a reproductive toxicity. It can cause a respiratory sensitizer. It's a respiratory sensitizer. It can cause respiratory sensitization. It can target organ toxicity. Okay, this is the meaning of this sign. Now the next sign is flame. You see this flame in inside this diamond ring. What it means is that the substance can emit flammable gas, that the substance is flammable, that the substance has organic periosites. They are also pyrophorics. They are self-heating and they are self-reactive. Okay. Now the other sign is this exclamation mark. The exclamation mark, what this sign simply means is that the substance is irritant to the eyes and to the skin. The substance also is harmful. Okay, the substance has a narcotic effect, and the substance is a skin sensitizer. Okay, so these are what this exclamation mark means. When you see it, that is what it means. The next sign is the corrosion sign. See the corrosion sign, what it simply means is that the substance is corrosive. It can corrode the skin. It can cause skin burn. It can cause eye damage. It can cause damage to metals. The next sign is this one with cylinder. It means that the substance is a gas under pressure. Okay, like oxygen gas, acetylene gas. So if you see that sign in the SDS, you know that is a compressed gas under pressure. Okay, then the other one is exploding bomb. That sign simply means that the substance is explosive, that is self-reactive, is an organic periosite. Now the other sign is this skull. You see this sign that has skull. It means that it's acute toxicity, that is, it's fatal. Okay, this it means that the substance can kill immediately without much symptoms. Then flame over cycle. This means that the substance is an oxidizer. It's an oxidizer. Now this one that has talking about environment means it's an aquatic toxicity. It means that the substance can be harmful to aquatic animals. It can harm the animals in the water, like the fishes. Okay, so these are the symbols that you will always see in the SDS and their meanings. Okay, so we are going to now we'll do a practical COSHH assessment. So after the session, the video will be available on our YouTube channel. You can watch it again when you have time. All right, I'll get an SDS. I'll get an SDS, then okay, I'm sharing on the screen an SDS so that using this SDS, we can conduct a practical COSHH assessment. Okay, so this SDS is for you see the name. I told you about the sessions of the SDS. Session 1 is identification. So in the identification, we can see the product name. Okay. We can see the product name is Everbond, right? Then we can see the contact details of the manufacturer. These are all in the session 1. The session 2 tells you about the hazards. And here we can see this symbol. You can see this symbol. You can see this symbol. This one is this exclamation mark. And this one is corrosion symbol. This one is irritant symbol. Okay, like I told you, in most SDS, they will not define the symbol. They will just give you the symbol. Then you should have understood the symbols and their meanings so that you'll be able to interpret them in your COSHH assessment. Okay, that is that in session 2 of the SDS. The session 3 of the SDS is telling us about the compositions. Now look at this. The compositions is this one is, let me increase the size. You have this poly. This is the product identifier. These are the content. These are the contents for this substance. Okay, section 4, like I told you, talks about the safety data sheet, talks about the first aid. Section 4 of the safety data sheet talks about the first aid measures. If you swallow it, if it enters your skin, your eyes, inhalation, injection, what do you need to do? Then section 5 talks about the accidental release. If there is a spillage, what are you going to do? Okay. Then section 7 is talking about the handling and storage. What type of storage area you need? How do you need to preserve it to avoid the contamination, explosion, and all that. Section 8 talks about the PPE, the personal protective equipment you need to use the substance. Section 8 is talking about the physical and chemical properties. I told you, see, this physical properties is that it's a liquid. Can you see that? And it's white in color, it's odorless. Okay, these are the properties of this substance. Now, the section 10 is talking about the reactivity and stability. At what condition will it react? So it reacts if there it will not react if there is a normal condition. Okay, it's very stable under normal condition. Section 11 is talking about toxicology, and section 9, physical, 10, stability, 11, toxicology. And so these are all what we have thought about in the last segment. Now, let's do a practical COSHH assessment. So I presume that in your workplace, you have a form. You have your own form for conducting a proper COSHH assessment. Okay. Now, the first thing is name of substance. This is my own form. In your workplace, you might have a different type of form. Okay. But that does not take away the information. As far as you're able to pick out the information from the safety data sheet, transfer it to your COSHH assessment form. Now, from my So I want to share with you the form so that you see the form while I'm working on it. All right. So this is my form. This is the type of form I use. Okay. So the name. What is the name of the substance? The name of the substance is Everbond spray paint. This is the name. Where did I get the name from? From the SDS, from the safety data sheet. The safety data sheet, section 1, tells me the name of the substance. Okay? Now, what next? The hazard signs. In my SDS, the hazard sign I have is this, the corrosion sign, and this exclamation sign. So that leaves me with irritant and corrosion. Okay. So this is where I will put my hazard signs. Where did I get this hazard sign from? From the SDS. This is the other hazard sign. The SDS gave me 2 hazard signs. Okay, telling me that this substance is, one is corrosive, the other one is irritant. Okay, now I have my hazard signs. I can name them. Irritant. I can name the other one corrosive. Okay, now the personal protective equipment, where do I get them from? I'll go straight to my section what? to my session 8. I'll go straight to my session 8 of this, my SDS. That is where you will see the recommended personal protective equipment. Exactly here in the session 8. Okay. The recommended personal protective equipment is hand gloves, chemical resistant materials, and safety goggles. Is that okay? In session 8 of your SDS, that is where you will see this, your personal protective equipment recommended for this hazardous substance. Okay, the next section is the control measures. Okay, now let's go back to the SDS. Which session do you get the control measures? Control measures are also in session 8. Session 8 of the SDS, see where it says control parameters. Control parameters, you'll be talking about the type of ventilation you have to provide, the controls, you have to wash your hand. That is what it says in SDS. There should be proper ventilation, okay? And only authorized persons should be allowed. So these are controls under the session 8. Okay, now the next session is the first aid session. If you go to your SDS, your safety data sheet, session 4, first aid measures. First aid measures, session 4. Now, it says, first aid measure after inhalation. When symptoms occur, go into open air and ventilate suspected area. Obtain medical attention if breathing difficulty persists. Okay, so that is what it says after inhalation. Inhalation simply means when you breathe it in. If you inhale it, you should go to open air and go to the doctor if the symptom persists. Now, for contact with the skin, if there is a contact with the skin, it says immediately drench affected area with water for at least 15 minutes. This is what it says you to do if there is a skin contact. If there is a skin contact, at least 15 minutes, you have to drench with water. Okay, which other first aid? If there is eye contact, if the substance enters the eye, rinse the eyes continuously for at least 30 minutes. For at least 30 minutes, you need to continue rinsing the eyes with water if the substance enters the eye. Okay, now what did he say if there's ingestion? Ingestion simply means going into the mouth. If you, either by omission or commission, it enters your mouth, what are you supposed to do? Rinse the mouth with what? With water. Do not induce vomiting. Don't put your hand inside your mouth so that you can vomit. No, do not induce vomiting. Just rinse your mouth with water and go for medical attention immediately. Seek for medical attention. Okay. Now, fire response. We go to our session 5. See session 5 of this SDS. It tells me about fire response. Talks about the type of fire extinguisher I have to use. So this SDS says suitable extinguishing media. 1, water spray, fog, carbon dioxide, CO2, alcohol-resistant foam, or dry chemical. These are suitable fire extinguishing media, which means if there is fire extinguisher, this is what you are, if there is fire outbreak, this is what is recommended to be used according to the manufacturer. Okay. So in that session, this session of fire response, you need to list the fire extinguishers that are recommended. And where do you get them from? You get them from section 5 of your safety data sheet. You can see that here, section 5. All right, now in my COSHH assessment form, the next thing is to talk about the spill response. The spill response, if there is a spillage, what are you supposed to do? You go straight to your section 6. Section 6 of your safety data sheet talks about accidental release measures. So if there is accidental release, what are you going to do? First, you have to protect the environment, prevent entry into sewer or public water. Don't allow the substance to go inside the water system. Okay, contain any spill with absorbents. What it simply means, like in construction site, we have spill kits. So those spill kits have some foam-like substance inside it. So it's an absorbent. It can absorb the substance and prevent it from going into the soil. So absorb it immediately. That's what it says. Clean up spills immediately and dispose of waste safely. Okay, so all this information can be gotten from your section 6 of your safety data sheet. Okay, so this is how to conduct a proper COSHH assessment. This is how to conduct a proper COSHH assessment. So this is my own form. In your workplace, you might have a different checklist. So in your checklist, whatever your checklist requires, you can find that information directly in your SDS safety data sheet.
अब क्या बुरा है उन्हें?
चलता है ऑलरेडी? हेडसेट है तरकने?
लाइन आ गया तुम?
देखेंगे एक बार। अबे बात को सुनता हूँ मैं।
नहीं सुनाता नहीं।
इन्हें मेरा
सवाई सुनाता है।
ईमेल से
Unmute.
वर्कशॉप करना।
Okay, so that is that for COSHH assessment. Okay, so if you have any question, you can ask now. And if you miss any segment of the training, you can always watch the video later to get clear information. Any question before we round up? You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat box. Okay, I thank you all for coming. Do have an interesting and a lovely day ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you so much, bro. Thank you very much. It was a very wonderful session.
Thank
Yeah, it's Milan that is talking, and I really enjoyed this session. And
Okay.
I hope to see more of this session today.
All right.
Thank you so
you.
much. Yeah.